Welcome to the Nonprofit World on Nutmeg TV. I'm Paula Sorrells-Bean, your guest host today, and I want to introduce you to Serena Gatlin, who is the founder of Her Zone, Inc.
Yes.
Welcome, Serena, to the Nonprofit World.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you.
I want to hear all about Her Zone, Inc. Could you tell us to begin with, tell us what your mission is?
Well, just a little backstory on why I started Her Zone. Of course, it's more so pertaining to like my own personal journey, and just as an African American woman, you know, what I'm faced with in society. Mm-hmm. So the idea came about some years ago, and I've been working on it since maybe 2009, but life happens. And I kind of like fiddled around with the name. It wasn't initially Her Zone, Inc. It was Gifted Treasures. And as I thought more and more about it, I really wanted something that would speak to people globally. And I played around with the name, and the play on words of her became more and more popular. And as I kept just thinking about it, Her Zone within, if you don't see the graphic of it, but Her Zone focuses on the hero within oneself. So the way that it's spelled out, there's an emphasis on her, and then O and the zone, which you can't see, and just how we operate as women and what we go through on our journey and in our zone. Each zone is a phase of your life. And regardless of what you go through on your journey, it's always going to be about accountability. So how are you holding your own self accountable and taking ownership of yourself as you pass through each zone of life versus a phase? And you have to always be your own hero through each phase or through each zone of life. So that's really how I came up with it. I changed the name maybe about Gifted Treasures was one, but I changed it maybe 2 or 3 times, but I rested on that after a lot of soul searching. Her Zone is going to focus on young women ages 13 to 21. Okay. And I have a media background. So in media, we will focus on help young women increase their voice and their visibility, especially young women in urban settings. There's a lot of misconceptions about young women in the urban settings. And again, young women in the urban settings, I believe, are underserved. And I have been blessed, I believe, and worked very hard to acquire a lot of skills that I believe need to be transferred to young women in urban settings. And they need to know that they belong and that they deserve and that they deserve everything, that you shouldn't be grateful for what you have, or you shouldn't be, especially through life. If you're here and you're born, then you're here. What you do in your life, you need to take ownership of that. But how do they get there? How do you get there? I believe everyone needs help in getting there. Through my life, I did not have a lot of help getting where I am today. I went through the foster care system. I was in and out of the foster care system. So for me, sometimes it was life. It wasn't always about life. It was about survival. And I remained very ethical through life, and I had to make a lot of strong moral, positive moral decisions. To help me get where I'm at. And it was through a lot of hard work. And there are a lot of our young women that don't have hope. They don't believe because of their circumstances that they are entitled to opportunities, or they don't even know opportunities exist. Opportunities exist for them. So that's a reason for the mission of Her Zone. I was not raised initially in an urban setting. And so for me, that really helped me and armored me with dealing with society because of the things that I faced as a youth, not growing up initially in an urban setting. So a lot of those lessons armored me with an arsenal of knowledge and power to help other young women.
Wow, that's wonderful. in your foster homes, did you have someone in particular who influenced you during those early years?
No, I didn't. I'm a twin. I have a twin sister, and I have 2 older brothers. And for much of those lessons or events in the foster care system, we always just had each other. I know you hear the violent stories of people that are placed in, these environments, but that wasn't the case. It was just always our strength that got us through what we were dealing with at that time. I just always knew that I wanted to help someone else because I know what was lacking in my life. I didn't have a terrible childhood, let me just be clear, because we're always, equated to having terrible childhoods. However, it was rough. It was rough. But I think my resilience, I know now, and tenacity got us through those situations. And I just knew what other young women needed. And you didn't have to be a minority. However, I am a minority. So that is my mission, to help other young women that are minorities.
Okay. And is your plan to reach out like in the school systems or in the fostering world, or where do you want to find these girls, young women, to work with?
I've been working with young women for years. I started volunteering in other organizations to try to kind of like get my feet wet to see what I would be up against and what I would be facing. So I've been volunteering. I'm on some national committees. I'm on some executive boards that deal with young women. So finding young women for me will not be difficult. It is getting your business model together to make that dream a reality. I will be dealing with young women in the school system. I deal with other young women that are in college. I have a mentee now that is in Hampton University. I also am going to have a youth advisory board. I'm going to groom these young women to reach back and help their counterparts, their peers, because it is about reaching back and helping. So definitely finding the young women. I don't think that would be an issue because I've worked on this for so long and I've planted seeds. And the seeds that I've planted, I believe, will be a help. My focus definitely is on Hartford initially. I was born and raised in Torrington, Connecticut. And then I moved to Newport, Rhode Island. And I came back to Hartford. And honestly, I can say, some of the upbringing that I did receive because of not being in an urban community, I was advanced when I came back to Hartford. And it was a challenge for my mom to find us support in the educational system that we'd had already surpassed it. So trying to, my sister and my brothers and I, we had already surpassed it. And so that was just, I knew from a young age that I wanted to help young women. And that's why it's just so deeply implanted in me. I know I'm getting a little off course, but so I reached back to, there's people that I know that work in the school systems now that I ended up being in when I came back to Hartford. So finding the young women for me is definitely, I don't think that's going to be a challenge again. Like I said, I believe I planted enough seeds over the years. It's just now about giving it momentum and making that dream come to fruition. So yes.
Yeah. Now you talked about the girls having self-accountability.
Yes.
Will they also have accountability to others?
Yes.
Okay.
Because along my journey in life, I've always, my moral compass was always intact. And so that is whether that was personal or professional, even faced with a lot of challenges. And I believe everything starts with respect. But a lot of people, not just our young women, but young men also, they don't even respect themselves. So you have to teach them, because once you are convicted in who you are, in a positive nature and respect, and you understand what self-respect is about, and you understand your self-worth, you'll respect someone else, whether you are in the shoes of disagreement or not. It's a discipline. It's not easy. But I believe if you're going to help groom your community, and if you're going to be a positive asset to your community, it has to start with your self-respect, and you definitely have to respect others. It goes without saying. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree with that. You said your moral compass was intact.
Always.
Do you believe that it was just something innate in you, or do you think that had to do with the environment that you were in? What do you attribute that to?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. Although we were in and out of the system, my mother did instill. She did instill integrity and ethics in us. She did. And also, I just knew I wanted better. I knew I wanted better in life. And I could have easily, because of some of the circumstances that I went through, chose to go left instead of right. Either way you go on the journey, it's going to be hard. But if you go left, it's going to be a little bit harder. And I just always knew I wanted more, and I always knew I wanted better. So some of the tools, actually a lot of the tools that were instilled in me, I carried throughout my life. And then also from seeing a lot of the adversities, I knew that's not what I wanted. I knew that's not what I wanted. I wanted more for myself. And, hearing stories like what's going on now into sexual harassment, and just, dealing with a lot of things that impact young women, unwarranted advances, unwarranted things in life. And I just knew that's not what I wanted, because it's a setback. It definitely would be a setback if my moral compass was not intact. And that's where you have to rely on your self-respect first, because I know there are some women that will respect others before themselves, because they're not taught that. They're taught to obey. And I just knew that's just not how I was raised. And again, some of the adversities, I knew that that's not what I wanted in life. I knew I wanted to do better. It was just, how do I get there? How do I get there?
How do you get there? Yeah. You talked about the zone being different phases of life. Can you talk about some of those phases that, especially in that age group between 13 and 21?
Absolutely. As a teen, I was a teen mother. So the first phase, of course, is inception of life. That's your first phase. The second one to me is being a youth, and where I believe you're supposed to be taught the basic necessities and basic things in life. And although you are, sometimes you may stray a little bit, or sometimes you may not. But then, the other phase is, I became a mom as a teenager. So there were no instructions on what to do as a teen mom. I had to figure it out. And that was, I think, that phase of my life, it really taught me a lot, because now I was not just responsible for me, I was responsible for someone else, and how I knew how I was raised, or some of the things I faced growing up, and I did not want that for my son. So that phase of my life was very critical to who I was and who I was becoming as a woman. And the next phase for me is now you're trying to really figure it out, because you're so carefree as a kid. You're trying to really figure it out. And this is where real life smacks you, really, really hard. And that phase was now I'm entering into, how do I literally survive, not just for myself, but for another human. And that it was a lot. It was a lot. And there's a lot of young women out here that are teen moms that don't have any type of understanding of who they are, let alone trying to be a parent, So I've gone through some pretty diverse phases here. And all of those, I think they in the pot. It's like a soup. It's like a soup. It's like a soup. It's just like a melting pot of all of these different areas of trying to figure out your life, and trying to be responsible. Are you always good at it? No, you're not always good. Are you perfect? No. But I believe, again, with the self-accountability, what do I want to do as I go through each phase? And this is when you're looking for people to try to help you figure it out. And the help is not always there. So then you're going from your comfort zone now to a challenge zone, and a lot of us are afraid to step out of our comfort zone because those challenges we don't want. But a lot of those challenges, they come regardless. And when you're just alone or you feel alone and you need to figure it out, that phase is not always pleasant, because we, as teens and as young women or young men, you do believe people are out there to help you. And that's not always the case when you can't figure it out. And again, being an African American woman, it was 30 times harder for me to try to get ahead, I believe, versus, someone of, Caucasian, ethnicity. It's very hard. So I had a lot of chips stacked against me. So you go through that phase, which that phase started when I was in school, when I started in kindergarten. So if I can help young women understand that, you need to come out your comfort zone, because your challenge zone is going to be a lot longer. That journey through your challenges isn't going anywhere, and you're going to have to keep switching hats. And I had to switch that hat from a young girl, to a youth, to a young mom, to a grown woman. And those hats are going to keep changing. And what do you do as you keep going through each zone? Because again, the help may not always be there. So I really want the young women to understand that comfortable, it's safe, but if you kind of cross over to face your challenges, you can be more productive, because you don't know how to fight if you never had to.
Right.
You don't know how to fight if you never had to. And a lot of our young women and men, they seem to think they're invincible from the real world. Well, the real world is waiting for you. And I had to take on the real world at an early age. And I just knew that I need to be able to help someone. I can help someone, because there's a lot of hurdles and a lot of adversity. But again, if you keep your moral compass intact and you do take self-accountability and ownership, and I also had to learn how to take ownership. I am not perfect. We all have to learn how to take ownership. And once you realize that, taking ownership will help you through these zones, it may be a little easier for you. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it sure does. It sure does. Did you find, as a pregnant teen and as a young mother, did you find resources in the community that were helpful for you? Pregnancy centers or places where you could go to get some assistance, anything like that?
Pregnancy centers, I didn't utilize. I wasn't really familiar with them, so I didn't really know the help was out there. Assistance, I knew it was out there, but it wasn't going to be something that I relied on. Of course, you need help. Who needs help at that age, but it wasn't going to be a crutch for me. And even in that, going through that whole circumstance, sometimes that can be a little bit, you can feel a little dehumanized going through that process. I just knew that wasn't something that I wanted for my long term.
Going through the process
of trying to get help and trying to help. Going through the process as a young mother, as a teen mother, going through the system as you want to go in, because I had already been in the system as a foster care child, but now you need help or you need relief, and going through that system, you can feel like, just a cow being herded. But at the time, all you know is, I need resources. I need resources. And the resources that they have for young women today, as far as educational tools and helping people, that wasn't really available back then. And my mind wasn't there back then. But it definitely wasn't, the help was not there. No. Yeah. But, as a young mother going through that, if you don't realize there is more out there, you can settle for that. You will say, and I'm not a settler, but I did use it as far as assistance. But again, my son is 27 years old. So there was that type of support was not available, and you're looked down upon. And I feel like I said, it can be a dehumanizing experience. And we need to teach our young women that, you do matter. And if you have to go through a system like this, please don't make it a lifetime thing. Use it because everyone needs assistance, because hurdles come, challenges come, life happens. But understand that you are more, and you don't have to be treated a certain way because you are in that circumstance. But as a young adolescent, when your mind is not mature enough to understand that, you deal with what comes your way. And that's another zone, trying to teach them how to deal what is going to come your way. It doesn't always make you a bad person, because help isn't always bad. Help isn't always bad. But how are you receiving the help? How is the person towards you that is giving you the help? Right. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, because I know today there are pregnancy centers out there that are, it's not really, I wouldn't say they're in the system, or they wouldn't make you feel like you're in the system, but they do offer assistance and help for the young single moms, or even moms that are just unexpectedly pregnant.
And also, I think, I'd like to think, we are in a better place as people, and leaders are important. Leaders are important. And if the leaders are not in a good place mentally, or if the leader does not know how to lead, that funnels down to your team. So if you have someone in place that does not care about the population, or who cares about walking through the door, or just cares about a young life or life in general, then sometimes the workers take on that same mindset. So I'm a firm believer that, everything does start at home. Everything starts with your leader going into these situations. So, people, their mindsets are in a better place. Now, I think also because we as a community are more vocal about the support we are receiving or not receiving. We as a community are trying to build and save our communities. We have great leaders and not so great leaders in position, and you have to care. You have to, care. A community needs to be about care. We can't look down upon someone because of their situation, because a lot of people, whether it's in an urban community or it's in, the suburbs, everyone needs help. Everyone needs help. But because of a certain demographic, or you are definitely looked at in a particular view lens. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the model that you're talking about for her zone.
Thank you.
I think that, and I can see it working not only with African American girls, but I can see it working with teenagers of all races, and I think it's wonderful. One of the things that you talked about earlier was the media and the voice and visibility.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned technology and social issues. So could you elaborate on those two a little bit?
I'll start with the media.
Okay.
Increasing our voices in the media, because we are seen in a specific light, and the controller of the media dictates what is put out into the society, what is put out into society. And if you don't have, going back to leader, a strong leader that will help dictate that process on how we want to be seen and how we want to be viewed, and how do we take our voice, that empowerment, and turn it into education, and using media outlets to make that happen. And because I've worked in media for some time now, behind the scenes, I see the dictatorship. I see the dictatorship. I see how things are controlled. I see how, if you have something to say, something good to say, if you want to focus on a particular subject, how that could possibly be pushed to the wayside. So by creating your own, we are our own media. We are our own media. When you're in someone else's space, you're their media. So by learning everything that I have and transferring these skills onto young women, you take your own media, you step on your own soapbox, you be your own radio, you be your own television, create the space that you need so you can be heard, of course, in a respectful manner. And sometimes it may not be respectful. Sometimes it may get a little uncomfortable, but we need to be able to translate what we need to translate, and we need other people to hear that. We need other people to see that. We need people to understand that. And again, that's not always comfortable, but we are our own media. So that's teaching the young women. You are your voice. Use your voice. I will teach you how to use your voice, because I always, I come from an era where we were looked down upon. We were shunned. We could not be vocal. We could not. We were definitely stopped from using our vocal abilities to express ourselves. And it's huge for me to teach young women how to express yourself and get your point across and articulate yourself and use what you have as a tool and a gift for other women and other people in society. So that the media aspect of that. Technology, again, we need to educate our young women so they can have skills, so they can go into corporations and make a difference and pull other people, other like-minded people, other people of the same ethnicity in. Because in corporations, there's not a lot of the ratio is, it never evens out. I don't think it ever will. But there's not a lot of complexion in particular companies or at certain levels of companies. And the harder I work and the more I learn and the knowledge I gain, I can pass that on to the next young woman and bring her in so we can continue to just go up that ladder and we can continue to build and pull each other in, because it starts with one person. And so that is very important for me to help change the complexion of media as well.
Very interesting. Good. Technology, yes. I mean, I think our world is really in an innovative state, and it's just going to keep progressing in technology. Where I am employed, technology is our world. We are a large media-based company, media technology and broadcasting, and I have a lot of hard skills in technology, and I believe, again, education, and you have to be able to keep up. And I don't want to, well, sometimes they are a trend, like with social media, computers, learning how to code, learning how to run hard cameras, learning how to work in control rooms, learning how to mic people. Those hard skills in technology are needed, because you will get left behind again. And in those positions, there's not a lot of people of color. That not that we're not skilled, we're just not there. So we need our communities to be equipped with those hard skills in technology. Not just in media, technology, social awareness, civic awareness, all of the skills that we need to help build up our community and help, again, to change the complexion in technology and broadcasting, where you have a platform and a camera, how to use that platform. Technology is not just about, hard skills and broadcasting. It's being in front of those cameras. You need to know how everything works so you can make a show like this come together. So, yeah. Yeah. So does that kind of cover the social issues aspect as well, or is that
social
something different?
issues? Yeah, social issues for me, again, they kind of work hand in hand. A lot of social issues that we face, discrimination, entitlement, affirmative action. There's a lot of social issues where they intertwine together. But for me, the social issues, I think first and foremost for me would definitely be discrimination. And I know discrimination comes in many facets, but I mean a color discrimination, if we're going to start there. And that's a huge that's really huge, and that's what's really going on. We're not in 400 years ago, but it feels like it hasn't stopped, and it's going full force right now. And we are still fighting to make a difference, fighting to be heard. We're still fighting to be seen. And when these same social issues are referenced as, well, we're not back there. Well, I don't think we ever left. And I think having dialogue and getting together in a room and having uncomfortable conversations about discrimination and about just facing race issues and systematic oppression, these are things that I definitely will be dealing with my organization, with my young women. And from a positive standpoint, because one thing is, I believe hate is taught. So you have to be careful the way that you transfer what you know to someone else. And you may not be able to control how they're going to take what tools they're given and use them, but you do have to be careful about how you translate societal issues to other people, because it can become a heated issue. They can become heated topics. So I'm going to be very, very, strategic when dealing with those social issues. But it's something that we're just faced with as a people. We just are, and it's not going away. It's really not. Hopefully, I'm going to try to work on getting it better. Again, like I said, I deal with a lot of organizations, and this is always a topic of conversation. And I think communication is key, but I think understanding is what opens the door. So, I would have to say for social issues, other than, social awareness and the civic awareness, and there's a lot of things there. That would be probably the number one, because we have to learn, not even learn. I think that's the wrong word. We have to, and I think because I believe certain behaviors are taught. We, as women, not just African American women, but I am African American, so I will speak to that a lot. We're automatically mentally wired to believe that we can't have. So we walk into situations automatically feeling defeated sometimes, regardless of our accolades, regardless of our education level. You and I could share the same accolades and the same education level, or mine could be better, but you would definitely be the front runner for everything. And although you may not be like that, this is what we automatically think, because this is what society has handed us generation after generation after generation. So
you feel like that is still going on
Absolutely.
Today?
Absolutely.
In the corporate world and elsewhere?
Oh, yeah. Definitely in the corporate world and personally, but I see it every day. And, and I've been faced with some issues myself. But because of the way that I was brought up or where I was raised and what I had to deal with early on, dealing with discrimination and dealing with racism, it taught me how to take on the corporate world, which a lot of young people, they don't know how to do. They do not know how to walk into these situations and understanding that term of pick your battles, and we don't, because we're automatically met with, negative stereotypes. We're not allowed to voice our opinions without being tailored or pegged as defensive. Being defensive, insubordinate. We're just not allowed to use our voice. If we walk into a situation, we automatically, in our mind, mentally have to take it down 10 notches, because we are going to be put in the shoes of being the instigator or the agitator versus being the person that's coming in and trying to have an understanding of what's going on. And the moment that our voice or our vocal abilities we're getting ready to use our voice, we're met with, we don't understand. You don't understand. I'm sorry. You're defensive. Just the negative stereotypes that come with and that's just, I know I'm a little bit all over the place, but that's just something that we're faced with a lot. So the systematic racism really affects you in all walks of your life. It really does. Yeah. It does.
We talking about discrimination. And one of the things that we've been seeing a lot on the news lately is a lot with sexual harassment. And you mentioned that earlier, even talking to the girls about that and how to deal with that. And I have not worked in the corporate world for a while. So I've kind of been out of that environment. But obviously, there's a lot of that still goes on. Do you see that a lot today?
It happened to me, not where I'm currently at, but some years ago, and it was a supervisor. And when it happened, everything was just like in a fog, because I knew what the person did was not right. I knew their approach was not right. I was so confused, but who do I go to? Who do I tell? Especially when the higher ups are male dominated. When it's male dominated in the upper offices, I want to say that the higher tier, the hierarchy is often male dominated. And so I went to a coworker because it just would not escape my mind, because I knew what happened was not right. And my coworker was definitely, you're going to say something. You're not going to hold this in. This was the very next day, you're going to say something. So I went she took me to a female supervisor at the place where I was working at the time. And luckily for me, the female supervisor did not make me feel like the victim, because she didn't want to deal with it. So I'm blessed to say my situation was dealt with. But I do see it. And again, sexual harassment comes with diverse definitions. What is sexual harassment? Like I was saying earlier, sexual harassment isn't always a male to a female issue. It can be the same sex orientation. It's what is your definition of sexual harassment? And a lot of women and men are afraid to speak up because they're afraid to lose their job. They're afraid to feel like they're throwing someone else under the bus. It's a very hard thing to deal with. It's very hard to deal with, because even when it happened to me, I had to take time off of work, because mentally it really, really, really bothers you, because you do blame yourself. What did I do? What did I do wrong? Did I have on the right thing? Were they looking at me wrong? Like, there's a lot of narratives in your mind. You're just racing through your mind, and you are blaming yourself. Although my situation turned out, better than others, because in my instance, what happened was, because a lot of companies cover it up also. This gentleman did it before. He did it before. And I'm not sure how many instances that he had, but I guess I was the straw that broke the camel's back, because I was very vocal about it after I got up the nerve, and because of the support from my coworker. Had I not went to her, I probably would have kept it to myself, because at the time I was around 24 years old. And at that age, you think sometimes a lot of stuff until you're in the shoes and things happen to you. And when it happened to me, my mind was all over. But luckily for me, because they did cover it up. They covered it up. And so that happens a lot too. There's so many different reasons why people don't come forward. And yes, it can be years later. But also trying to find out if it's the truth or not is another area to face. And again, oftentimes, more so than not, the victim is blamed. The victim is blamed, and it's very sad. And there are a lot of young women out here, I'm sure right now, as that are going through this. And hopefully what is going on in the world right now is giving them hope and power to speak up and pull the right person aside who they can confide in, like I did, to say, hey, this happened to me, regardless of how long ago it was. Because not even just with sexual harassment, but with everything that we've been talking about today, we need to talk more. It's going to make people uncomfortable. You're going to be made the victim. It's not going to be easy. Your life may become a living hell. But if it's going to bring change, then I think we should face it. And especially when it comes to the well-being of someone, to sleep with that at night, it's not good, because it affects your family. It affects your family, and it affects everyone. It affects the working environment. So it's really challenging, but we need to teach, again, hopefully through education. Everything through education, that we are going to, hopefully make a difference. And this sexual harassment is going to be taken, very serious, because years ago when you had, was Clarence Thompson, and when that happened, no one took her serious simply because they made a joke, out of the Coke can. But that was she was harassed, whether she was physically touched or not. And I think if you're uncomfortable and you're in an uncomfortable situation, don't let it fester. Speak up to that confidant, and to learn how to handle it. And I know in a lot of corporations now, they have employee assistance programs where everything is confidential, where you can call hotlines, where you can seek the correct line of action to take if you're not comfortable going to, another coworker or so. So that's really, really huge, because I used that just to help me get myself together mentally, because for 24 years, it was a lot, it was.
Yeah, I think the silence over the years has almost promoted more activity and more sexual harassment, because people, men in particular, but as you say, it could be women as well that are sexually harassing. But if they have the idea that they're not going to get caught, or even if they do get caught, that it will be either covered up or, nothing's going to happen. So it has just continued. Yes. And it really is time to see some changes there. And I hope that we will. I hope we will too. I think over the last year or so, we've seen more and more exposure of sexual harassment and things that have taken place that are just, appalling and
very appalling.
Unbelievable sometimes, because it happened not just once, but many, many times.
Many times.
And because the women are finally, having a voice and stepping up, I do hope that we're going to see some significant changes.
I do too.
In that.
I do too.
And that women won't have to deal with that. Or men. Have to deal with that.
We need to work together.
Absolutely.
We need to come together, and just, figure out how to unify on a lot of issues.
Yeah. Another big issue is the domestic violence. Because there's so much that takes place just within the home. Yes. And a lot of times, women they're not at a point where they feel like they can step up and do something about it.
Absolutely.
And so they deal with it. They live with it.
Absolutely. And especially when love is love is in the picture for domestic violence, a whole family suffers. Because, I think this is just my own opinion, sometimes, especially when the male is the breadwinner in the house and the woman doesn't want to lose, her sanctuary. She deals with it, which is really, really hard. And I know over the years, I've had friends that have lost friends to domestic violence, women and young women, not just young women, especially our young women, because the definition of love is wide, and some, are groomed to believe that if someone physically harms you, that means they care about you. And that's not always the case. And we need to figure out how to counter that. Physical harm is not love. An example, sometimes, from a young age, if you're on a playground and a young boy hits you and you run and tell the teacher, or you run and tell, oh, it's so cute, he hit you because he likes you. And that stays. Wow. That stays with some people. Okay, such and such, Tommy likes me. Just, he likes me, he hit me, or he's going to keep hitting me because he wants my attention. And so as you grow, that's what you start to believe love is. So it can start from there. So again, we have to be careful how we relay messages and how we teach
So true.
And how we teach, because I believe from an early age, you are very impressionable and you can retain a lot when you're younger. And sometimes it's hard for people to believe how someone can remember what happened to them when they were 5. But it happens. So if you start telling, oh, Tommy likes you and that's why he hits you from playing on the playground, that can stay with you, you know? So that was just a little analogy. So that's how it can spiral and grow. So we have to, and it's not always just love with domestic violence, it's control. It's definitely a control thing, because if you just have to be strong. Like, it can be love, it can be control. You know, then sometimes you have people that are, you know, physically harming people, let's just say because they served, and they're coming home with, with, is it PTS, I believe? Post-traumatic? PTSD, yes. So there's a lot, and I'm not just blaming that. I'm a military child. My family is heavily embedded in the military. So that's just, I'm not blaming it on that, but just giving different symptoms of why people, you know, it can be generational. It can, you know, so there's a lot of differences, but how do we begin to groom and teach, you know, our young people that's just, it's not correct. And it's not easy. I'm not an expert at it. I'm still, you know, I'm learning, being in this position of starting Her Zone. I'm learning a lot on how to deal with particular issues. Her Zone, I definitely want to be a fun place because we're dealt with negativity and seriousness all of the time. So it's going to be a fun place. But that doesn't mean that young woman may not come through the door of Her Zone with that issue that day. That's right. And a lot of times our young people, they can mask and hide and camouflage what is really going on. But am I going to be, you know, intuitive enough to pick that up? So it's a really serious issue. I do a lot of trainings, you know, I do go through a lot of mentor workshops because I may be faced with these things. So how do I, as a person in my shoes, how do I help? How do I help young people try to see the difference or what is different? It's those strategic and, you know, positive ways to help embed that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What about issues that are affecting women around the world?
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Things, I know, there are a lot. Even lack of access to education, employment opportunities, or the lack of employment opportunities.
I wish education was less expensive. I think that's, you know, and I wish we could just have, you know, tuition free like New York, you know, but we don't have that. So funding is really huge. And the cuts that we're possibly facing to education right now, it's not going to help either. But we're in the United States, the land of the free. So we have choices other than people that are in third world countries or cultural reasons why they're not allowed to educate themselves. I believe we need to find ways to take advantage of what is available. But with education is huge. Education, I believe, will catapult you further than money. But you know, what are some of the resolutions for educating women? And there are a lot of programs out there now that help, but I believe the one thing for lack of education is funding. Other issues that I believe that women, you know, are faced with around the world, there's an abundance of issues that we're faced with every day. And I forgot what you said, education and what was the
employment opportunities.
Employment opportunities. The employment opportunities, yes, because this is again male dominated when you enter into corporations, and I think the opportunities for women are becoming a little bit more available now because we are standing up, you know, we are deserving, we work really hard. And I believe when employment opportunities are not given, I think those are personal choices. I think sometimes those can be corporate numbers as well. I also believe that, not now, but women were not deemed as leaders how can we lead? Because a lot of people have the, I want to call caveman mentality. We belong in the kitchen. We belong, barefoot and pregnant, but we don't. We're educating ourselves, and women, to me, women run this country. Whether we have the White House as a platform, whether we have the White House as a platform or not, using that because it's a large platform, but we run this country. I believe we actually make this earth go round. We really do. But again, lack of employment, again, I think those are corporate numbers, personal choices. When women were believed that, to me, they could not lead, we were not. Men were always the ones to be in charge because let a man lead is the mentality of a lot of people. Proving our worth, again, and there was a lot of sexism and a lot of, again, harassment, and you're faced with, I know, not now, but more, and it could be going on, when you enter interviews and you're just treated like a piece of meat as a woman, because we're not worthy. But we're fighting. Women are fighting, and we're fighting strong, and we're coming out swinging because we belong. We belong. We educate ourselves to be here. We deserve to be here. I don't think we should be grateful. I think we should be grateful for life, not a job, if that makes sense, especially if you are skilled and you deserve it and you're working just as hard to be there, being grateful for an opportunity that you worked hard to get. I don't think so. I think we should be grateful if we have life. We should be grateful that our family is healthy. We should be grateful that we're healthy, but grateful because you used your tactics to keep me out of something I deserve. I don't think we should be grateful for that because we work really hard to be there. Yeah. But we, again, systematically, women are banding together and we are coming together. And there's a lot of barriers that we still face as women against women in the corporate world. I don't want you to come take my spot because there's not enough spots up here for us, where we should be pulling each other forward. So that's a lot of employment blocking from women as well, not just men, but there's a lot of lack of opportunities in the corporate world, to me, for various reasons. So yeah. On
the positive side of that, do you see much in the in your work environment where women do help women to be promoted and to succeed? Do you see very much of that?
I do. I do see that. Even at work, I'm just, I try to advocate for, my peers. And I can say we are blessed to have a lot of leadership and development and growth opportunities to help groom the next person up. Not to say that it doesn't come with challenges in any employment setting, but we definitely champion for each other in my work environment. Absolutely. And there are males that champion as well. But again, it's not easy. But I think, the corporate settings are coming around, but it has its hurdles. And so, yeah, it has its hurdles, but it has definitely gotten better. And that's what it's about. It's about having not just that mentor, but that sponsor. You can have that mentor, right? That helps groom you and helps to prepare and develop you. But then you have to have that sponsor, that advocate that's going to pull up to the table and say, Paula belongs here. Yeah. Paula belongs here. Who's sponsoring you to get where you need to go? And that's what we're missing. We're missing a lot of sponsorship within versus the mentorship. Yeah.
That's great. Wow. Well, I'm just excited, Serena, that you have been here today.
Thank you.
And just excited to hear about Her Zone.
Thank you.
What you're planning to do to help these young women to advance and to do well with their lives.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
Yeah. Well, I'm pulling for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
And what you're going to do. And just thank you for sharing your heart with us today. And
I enjoyed
just
you.
opening up and being a part of this program.
Thank you.
And we hope to to hear more about Her Zone.
Yes.
In the near future.
Yes, working really hard, tired nights.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. But you know, it's trial and error. It's a work in progress. You know, it's going to go where it's supposed to go, and that's the only thing I can hope for. That's it. That's all I can hope for, is just to do my part. You know, I don't want to be famous, and I just want to do my part, and you know, that's pretty much what it's about for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many, I hope that more will step in and do the same thing, not just for young girls and women, but for young men.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
And to see them grow. And I think that if we see that, then I think we'll see some changes.
It's true. It's true.
In the things that we've talked about here today.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, because
Thank you.
our young men lead. They do. We need our young men to step up and be powerful and lead as well. A strong man does, you know, help groom a strong woman. Absolutely.
That's right.
Thank
Great.
you.
So nice to have you
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you for joining us today on the NonProfit World Network TV.